Welcome to Things You Don't Know. Among the many things that we take for granted is the common toothpick. Yeah, the toothpick has many different uses and is far more ancient than one might imagine.
I have to admit, I was very surprised to learn that toothpicks have ancient origins, dating back to civilizations such as the Mesopotamians, Egyptians, and even the Greeks and the Romans. Among the many eating utensils created over the millennia, toothpicks are known to be so old that they actually predate the modern history of the human race. Archaeological findings scattered all around the world confirmed that the skulls of Neanderthals and Homo sapiens alike have shown obvious signs of teeth were regularly picked and cleaned with a tool. In those early periods of our history, various types of soft and hard wood were used as tools for oral hygiene, whether soft grass to floss or chewing of sticks until one end of it became soft and therefore perfect for brushing teeth. Check out our toothbrush podcast when you get a chance. These kind of chewed sticks were found many times in the areas where our prehistoric ancestors lived. As for the toothpicks, they were created from any number of available materials: wood, bone, ivory, shells, bird claws, even walrus whiskers, as well as many others.
The Romans in particular are known for their oral hygiene practices, including the use of toothpicks made from various materials such as wood, bone, and metal. Metal, yeah. Now, Native Americans' use of toothpicks has been documented across various tribes, and their applications were diverse, reflecting broader cultural ingenuity. Before the advent of modern dental care, Native Americans utilized toothpicks made from natural materials for oral hygiene. These toothpicks were typically crafted from the wood of specific trees known for their durability and antibacterial properties, such as birch or sassafras, for example. The design of these toothpicks was often simple but functional. They were carved thin enough to clean between teeth effectively. In addition to their practical dental use, these wooden tools sometimes held ceremonial importance, featuring in rituals or as part of traditional medicine practices, where they might be used to apply small amounts of healing compounds to specific areas. Further historical insights can be found by exploring archaeological findings and ethnographic records that provide evidence of such everyday items in Native American life. These resources reveal not only the practical implications of such tools, but also their integration into the broader context of Native American technological and cultural adaptations to their environment.
Toothpick is one of the few inventions being used today that predates the arrival of modern humans. Fossil evidence of ancient skulls, for instance, as we said, suggests that early Neanderthals used tools to pick their teeth. Scientists have also found tooth indentations indicative of teeth picking in human remains all over the world, among Australian Aborigines, prehistoric Native Americans, and the earliest Egyptians. The practice of teeth picking was not uncommon among early civilizations, too. Mesopotamians, for example, used instruments to keep dental crevices clear, and artifacts, such as toothpicks made out of silver, bronze, and various other precious metals that date back to antiquity, have also been unearthed all over the world. By the medieval period, carrying a gold or silver toothpick usually in a fancy case, became a way for privileged Europeans to distinguish themselves from commoners.
Oh, indeed. And we so much must be distinguished from commoners. Yeah, right. The arrival of the Metal Age brought a revolution in toothpick use and creation. From even the earliest age of bronze metalwork in northern Italy and the East Alps, there was a production of small and slim bronze toothpicks. This tradition of metal toothpicks continued throughout the ages. And as you said, Dr. Deneen, high profile citizens of Rome and the Roman Empire liked to use pieces made from silver and bronze. Roman Emperor Nero was famous for his public use of silver toothpicks on some festive occasions. After the fall of the Roman Empire, other nations continued to refine and create toothpicks from many materials they found around them. The Norse Vikings used wooden toothpicks, others used the frontal teeth of lizards attached to small sticks, and some countries like Japan produced stringent roles and rules and rituals regarding the use of toothpicks. Sort of interesting.
Indeed, the Japanese seem to have a gift for organizing absolutely everything. The fashion of 17th century Europe's nobility brought about the rise of very extravagant, I can hardly believe this, gem encrusted metal toothpicks, accompanied by similar and more easily manufactured porcupine quills, ouch, and simple wooden sticks. So the toothpick was not always quite the lowly, mass produced, and easily disposable piece of wood that we've come to know today. Queen Elizabeth I once received 6 gold toothpicks as a gift and would often showcase them to foreign ambassadors. There's even an anonymous portrait depicting her as an elderly woman wearing multiple chains around her neck from which hung a gold toothpick or the case for one. Meanwhile, those who couldn't afford such luxuries resorted to more creative ways of fashioning their toothpicks. The Romans came up with a particularly clever method of pulling bird feathers, chopping off the quill, and then sharpening the tip. The technique was passed on to future generations in Europe and eventually carried over to the New World. Over in the Americas, native peoples carved toothpicks from deer bone. And just up north, Eskimos used, as we said before, walrus whiskers.
Yeah, it seems strange to us today, doesn't it? Coincidentally, wood was generally considered unsuitable for the purpose of dislodging trapped food bits. Twigs from trees were inadequate because they tended to wear down when wet and had a propensity to splinter, which tended to be problematic. One exception to that rule is the mastic gum tree of southern Europe, with the Romans among the first to take advantage of the plant's pleasant aroma and its teeth whitening properties.
Leave it to the Romans. They tended to seek out and find new things. The American marketer Charles Foster was a marketing genius who might have sold a side of beef to a vegetarian. He was born in 1826 in Charlestown, Massachusetts, into an old and aristocratic New England family. While working for his uncle's import-export business in Brazil, he noticed that the native settlers there had beautiful teeth, which he attributed to their use of handcrafted toothpicks. The locals used a wooden sticks from a type of tree called the eriru. At a time when virtually everything was becoming mass-produced, Foster vowed to make a fortune producing wooden toothpicks so cheaply by machine that he could easily export them to South America.
Forster himself was not mechanically inclined. Howsoever, he had the business savvy to acquire the rights to a patent that gave him a monopoly on a toothpick making process. What he did is he approached a Boston inventor named Benjamin Franklin Sturtevant to produce toothpicks. Now, Sturtevant's passion was making shoes by machine. At the time, most shoes were put together with wooden pegs, and the weak link in the operation was supplying pegs of uniform quality. This led Sturtevant to concentrate on producing long strips of knife edged veneer from which pegs could be sliced off. Forrester saw that toothpicks could be made in much the same way, and by 1870, his operation was capable of producing millions of toothpicks per day. But he couldn't find a market for them in Boston. The tradition in Boston at that time and in the Americas was to whittle a toothpick on demand. It just didn't make sense to a lot of people to spend money on something that one could make for one's self, let alone on something that could be used once and then discarded. But Forrester devised ingenious marketing schemes. You're going to get a kick out of this.
He was perhaps the first businessman who created a demand and then offered a product to fill that demand.
Oh, I doubt that. I doubt that seriously.
He first targeted stationers who dealt in small items. When he could not place his product in their stores, they're not seeing the need for it. He hired personable young people to go to those same retailers and ask for wooden toothpicks. Naturally, the retailers had to turn away the potential customers because they didn't have any. Shortly afterward, Forster would make return visits to the stores where he easily sold his wares. To reinforce the wisdom of the shopkeeper's decision, Forster's shills soon came back to ask again for toothpicks, and this time the sales were made. The boxes of toothpicks were then returned to Forster, who could resell them to the retailer, who now was prepared to talk them up to real customers. To get toothpicks into restaurants, Forster hired Harvard men. After they had finished dining on Forster's dime at a local establishment, such as the Union Oyster House, they demanded wooden toothpicks. When they were told none were available, students raised a ruckus and vowed to never eat there again. Naturally, when Forster came around some days hence, the restaurant manager purchased boxes of toothpicks to distribute to his customers. Once wooden toothpicks became readily available in restaurants, diners picked them up on their way out and used them for their intended purpose. That still happens today. After they were used to clean the teeth, the toothpicks had a further use. Chewing toothpicks in public soon became very fashionable among well-to-do men. And after a while, young women began taking up the practice. One Bostonian observed that at lunchtime, nearly every third woman met in the vicinity of Winter and West Streets has a toothpick between her lips. This ostentatious primary and secondary toothpick usage in the 1870s served to further the general desire for toothpicks.
It was a common observation of the time that many of the young men standing in front of a good hotel chewing toothpicks were suggesting they had eaten in its fine dining room when they could not afford to do so. Remember, many of these young men were actually students. So, they didn't have a lot of money to spare. In time, chewing a toothpick anywhere became a sign of contentment and insouciance. In his life on the Mississippi, Mark Twain described feeling that he knew the river so well that he found himself cocking his cap and wearing a toothpick while at the wheel of his riverboat.
That sounds like something he would have done. Thus, the toothpick took on a life of its own, serving not only as a utilitarian object, but also as a status symbol and even as an accessory. When Charles Foster may never have dreamed that his toothpicks would have such unintended ancillary uses, he would no doubt have welcomed them as extensions of his initial marketing efforts.
The phenomena known as usage drift actually began a long time before Forster was making toothpicks. In 16th century Portugal, there was an order of nuns that supported itself by making and selling confections that were sticky to the fingers and tacky to the teeth. Perhaps to maintain and even increase demand for their sweets, the nuns began to make wooden toothpicks, which served not only to clean the teeth after eating, but also to pick up the morsels without touching them. When used in this way with sweets or hors d'oeuvres, the toothpick is once again more than an item with which to pick the teeth. But on a cocktail platter, an ordinary wooden toothpick can appear too common. Thus, there has developed a plethora of fancy toothpicks, gold and silver picks with elegant holders, where locals used wooden sticks from a type of tree called areola.
Cocktails provided another opportunity for secondary toothpick use and further marketing. Indeed, the olive, speared by a toothpick, has acquired an iconic association with the martini. The toothpick enables the olive to be retrieved without getting the fingers wet. But some fastidious drinkers do not know what to do with the bare toothpick. One fellow who did not want to put the wet pick down on the furniture put it back into his drink and then absent-mindedly took it in with a sip. When he tried to cough it up, horribly the thing got stuck in his nose, from where it was finally removed by an emergency room doctor. A swallowed toothpick can be deadly if it punctures the intestines. That's certainly an undesirable usage drift. It was an accidentally ingested toothpick that killed the famous writer Sherwood Anderson. And some also believe that peritonitis was the cause of the untimely death of President Warren G. Harding, who was an inveterate toothpick user.
Yeah. Hmm. There are many other examples of usage drift, including the sticking of a toothpick into brownies, baking in the oven, or cakes, or what have you, to test to see if they're done. This popular secondary use is part of so many baking recipes that in supermarkets now, toothpicks can often be found shelved not among the toothbrushes and dental floss, but next to the cake and brownie mixes.
Though it's readily promoted by manufacturers, usage drift is more often created by the consumers of a product. People are natural inventors, and they are constantly finding new uses for common objects of all kinds. The best ideas propagate quickly through the culture and then become embraced by manufacturers as their own. Before there were Q-tips, for example, young mothers wrapped a bit of cotton around the point of a toothpick and used it to clean out their baby's ears and nose. This practice can be recommended by the ladies' magazines and advice columnists and led to the invention of the Q-tip itself.
Just as a side note, recent advances in medicine have demonstrated that the use of the regular ball of cotton that's typified by the Q-tip is actually a very bad thing to put in your ear. Now, they do make a kind of Q-tip that has a spiralized ball rather than a round ball, which could then be twisted, and cerumen earwax can be pulled out that way rather than being compacted. Anyhow, at first, the hard wooden stick terminating in soft cotton swabs suggested the toothpick connection, but today's Q-tip disguises its origins with a white paper body that blends almost seamlessly into the swab ends. The latest supply of Q-tips bought for our bathroom goes even further in removing the product from its ancestry and infancy, except perhaps the iconic admonition to keep out of the reach of children. There is no hint on the package that these were once made exclusively for babies. On this variety pack, Q-tips are described as the ultimate beauty tool.
That's another example of how products created for one purpose can be used for another. The products that result from usage drift over time can ultimately assume a different identity. It gives little hint of their true origins and their once primary use. The mass-produced wooden toothpick that Charles Forster introduced to Boston in the 1860s has given rise to countless uses, fads, and spin-off products, all of which ultimately owe their existence to his marketing genius, whether we recognize it or not.
Okay, now we've given a lot of information about these Q-tips, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And if so, we would appreciate a like. We also want to encourage you to join us again. We've got some good things coming up, some more fun things, and lots of little things that you just may not know a lot about. You can impress your friends by giving this information out to them for free, right?
He's right,
Listen,
folks.
yeah. So, hey, come back and see us again. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.